So we're in our series on faith, which we've called Better Together. This is the first time I've got to speak on it, so I've sort of been like chomping at the bit a little bit because Tim's just been hogging it all, but that's all right. We titled this series Better Together because we kind of based it on the end of Hebrews 11. Well, the whole series is really based on Hebrews 11, which, if you're familiar with, we call it the faith chapter, because it's just full of people doing things by faith. That's pretty much how the whole chapter works. It's by faith this person did this, by faith this person did that. By faith, like that's pretty much the whole theme of the chapter. And it says right at the end, in the last couple of verses, if I've got this on, there we go. In verses 39 to 40, it says, speaking of all these people who did all these amazing things. So if you've got a Bible, let's open to Hebrews 11, right at the end of the chapter. So if you're on a phone, you want to scroll. And it says, we look like we're getting somewhere now. Verse 39 to 40, that these, being the heroes of faith, were all commended for their faith, and yet none of them had received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us they would be made perfect. So our whole idea of better together has been based on that we are part of the same story of the faith heroes in Hebrews 11. So it's not that these are just people in the past that you can learn and go, that's a good principle, I'll apply that in my life. They were actually looking forward to something that we've received, because part of what they were looking forward to was Christ. And Christ making them whole, making them perfect. And so together, we're all part of this same faith story. It hasn't ended because the Bible is closed. The faith story still continues. And so we're all doing it with these guys. So I want you to be encouraged by that. I also really don't like this verse a little bit, because I just feel like the poor guys got gypped. They were all commended for their faith. Great work, guys. Good faith. Here's your gold star. Oh, but you don't get what was promised. Not yet. Does that sit a little bit uncomfortably with anybody else? Yeah. They didn't get what was promised. And as I started thinking about this and praying on this, because it was just niggling at me, God really challenged my thinking on faith for things, and faith for situations, and faith that looks at the big picture. Because we've been talking about faith, and I don't want anyone to read this and go, oh, well, these guys didn't get what was promised, so what if I don't get faith for the things that God's promised me? Because what they were looking forward to was the completion of all things. They were looking forward to Christ coming. They were looking forward to the world being made whole. They were looking forward to everybody living in peace with Jesus as King ruling on earth. And they didn't see that. We also haven't seen that yet, right? So they had this big picture faith. And I think part of what Hebrews 11 is teaching us is that we've got to have some big picture faith too. We've got to see the bigger picture, what it is that God wants to do on planet Earth. And our next slide, oh man, I feel really lost without this clicker. It says, these were not people that were living by faith for one moment, but they were living by faith their whole life, waiting for the promise of God. It's really easy when you read through that chapter to go, oh, there was that one time Abraham did this and he had faith, or that one time Rahab did that. But they're in the chapter because they saw something. So their life was fixated on a bigger picture. And I want to challenge us, how would we be if God said that the thing you're waiting for the most you won't see in your lifetime? What if Jesus doesn't come back in our lifetime? I know we're all everyone's like, oh, Jesus is going to come back. There's war in Israel, so he's going to come back tomorrow. That seems to be the general thought. Everything's going to be fixed next week. What if it doesn't? Will we still have the hope to believe that God is going to do good things in our earth? That the kingdom is still being manifest here? And if we are to have the faith of the heroes of Hebrews 11, Our faith needs to be focused on seeing God's transformative power worked out here on earth. And it's going to be about seeing his kingdom here in all its glory. And that's not momentary faith. That's lifetime faith. That's I'm going to live this everyday faith. I'm going to every moment be looking forward to what God is doing on the world faith. Even if I don't see it. Because that's faith. Right? So, my message today is titled The Jauntiest Stroll, not scroll. There's a little picture of a little man walking. Why did I call it that? Well, a couple of reasons. We're going to talk about Enoch today, and as we'll find out, Enoch liked walking. But also because in our house we have a puppy dog. And anyone have a dog? Yeah. So you know if you have a dog that there are some words you cannot say unless you are ready to commit. Like, you can't say dinner unless you're ready to feed, like right now. We've got a beagle, so that's especially true. But one of those words is walk. So if you're planning on going for a walk either with the dog or by yourself, you can't use that word around him because he will be sound asleep. And then you'll be like, I'm planning on going for a walk, and he wakes up and he's like, walk? Did you say walk? I'd like to go for a walk. I'm keen for a walk. Who said walk? And then, he'll just follow you around the house. Oh, I heard you say walk. Must be walk time. So I've taken to using the term jaunty stroll. Because he doesn't understand that. That's nothing like walk. I'm like, later on we shall go for a jaunty stroll. And I really like the idea of a jaunty stroll because it's just relaxed. You're outside. No one cares about how many calories you burn on a jaunty stroll. You're just out there, enjoying life. And I want to talk today about the jauntiest stroll being the walk that you do with God. So we're going to look to Enoch a little bit. But before we get there, I'm going to ask you a question. Kylie looks like she's going to be my hero. Just like Jesus. Thank you, Kylie. You see, when we take Diego on a walk, the reason he wants to go on a walk is because it's just the best thing. He likes to smell all the smells. It's not an aerobic walk, walking a beagle, by the way. You walk like 3 steps and you stop and you smell this bush. And then you walk another 3 steps and you stop and you smell this bush. Like that's all he wants in life is to smell all the smells. If he can smell all the smells, that is him living the good life. And I want to ask you this morning, what is your idea of the good life? What do you see as a picture of the good life? And you'll see it as a picture, generally. What does it mean to flourish? When I was thinking about what does it mean to flourish, my mind automatically went to finances. I'm like, flourishing would mean like having enough finances to just be comfortable. Like, I don't want to be rich. I feel like that's too much pressure. But like I could go, I'll just buy those shoes and not really have to think about it. That would be my level of flourishing, right? But everybody's got a different level. Like for really poor people, flourishing might just mean I can put food on the table today. For some people, flourishing is like I need all of the money. Like if I had all of the money, then I'd be flourishing. Like we've all got a different picture of what flourishing is. We've all got a different picture of what the good life is. We were watching this TV show the other day. And it's like a standard cop solving murder type show. And the one starts with a murder. The cop solves everything all the time when no one else can do it. And then they all live happily ever after except for the dead person. But anyway, so the detective is interviewing this guy whose girlfriend bought him a boat. And he loves his boat. He's like, varnishing the boat. And the girlfriend is clearly a terrible person. She's like possibly the murderer at this point. And the guy's like, why are you with this woman? And he's like, well, I really like the good life. And for that guy, the good life is having a boat, having a rich girlfriend who bought him a boat. Doesn't matter if she's a criminal. Doesn't matter that he doesn't actually really like her. The good life for him is he's got a boat. It's not a show about Tim. technically, Tim's boat is my boat. He doesn't own a boat. I own a boat. But anyway, I let him use it sometimes. I'm nice like that. But the idea is that everybody has a different idea of what the good life is. When it comes to work, for some people it's only a good life if you're doing something you really love. For some people it's just that you got a job. And we all have this picture, and that picture is something that is mediated to us through the stories around us. Our culture, our family, our social environments, social media, they're all representing to you a picture of what human flourishing looks like. If you're hanging out with people who have the best houses, that will look like flourishing, and you'll be like, this is the good life. Or people who go on holidays all the time, that's the good life. Social media is terrible because it's always telling us you have to look this way and you have to own all these things, and if you don't own all these things, you're not actually flourishing. We need a biblically minded view of the good life, right? Because all visions of the good life outside of the Bible eventually disappoint us. I think I had a point, but I am going to make it now. I wasn't sure if I was making it later. I was thinking about how our culture has different ideas, and one thing in Australian culture that has been for donkey's years is that you should own your own home. Like, that's the Aussie dream, right? Own your own home. Except with the real estate market like it is, that dream is becoming increasingly hard for many people. And they did a survey and they found that 39% of Gen Z, let's just say Z, which are those born between about 1997 to 2012, so pretty much this area right here, 39% of those people feel pessimistic when they consider the possibility of owning their own home. And that makes me really angry, not because I'm really passionate about home ownership. I don't own a home. What ticks me off is that our culture says for you to flourish, you need to have this, but our system does not allow them to have that. So we have young people going, there is no possible way for me to flourish because I cannot have what my culture says I can have. And this is why we need a biblical view of the good life, a biblical view of flourishing, because that is possible in Christ. And because all visions of the good life outside of the Bible will eventually disappoint. Because there is a good life that you are made for. And what Hebrews 11 will show us is that you don't even need to see it come to fruition. You just need to be looking towards it and you're living it. Because the good life is all about faith and seeing what it is that God is going to do, even if you don't see it now. So who was Enoch? What was he looking forward to? You know, there is not really very much about Enoch in the Bible at all. Apart from genealogies, he's mentioned like 3 times. Genesis, Hebrews, and Jude. He gets more mention in the New Testament than the Old Testament, which is weird for an Old Testament guy, right? Like, he gets more verses there. So we're going to pull these apart and have a look at them. First, we're going to start in Hebrews 11. And it tells us there that by faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. So we'll just stop there. It's just a bit of a random sentence, really. By faith Enoch was taken from this life. You could initially read dead. But then Hebrews tells us he didn't experience death. Don't think that's what happened. He couldn't be found because God just took him. God was like, okay, rapture for you, Enoch. Up we come. Let's go. But before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So what Hebrews is telling us about Enoch is that he is a man of faith. It doesn't actually say he's a man of faith. It says by faith he was taken. It actually doesn't really require much faith to be taken. Really? It's a bit of an odd statement. But he had faith, and we know that because it says there in verse 6, without faith it's impossible to please God. But he was taken because he pleased God. So he pleased God, and God went, I'm so pleased, I'll take you. So clearly he had so much faith that God was like, all right, let's go. You are so great, you are coming with me. You do not have to stay here any longer. Who wants that that level of pleasing God, right? Yeah, all those moments when you're like, if the rapture could just happen now, right now, just try pleasing God. See what happens. This verse here, it tells us that anyone who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So what is the reward that Enoch got? Well, he was raptured. That's kind of a reward. But that's not really what Hebrews is trying to point out here. It wasn't just that he was raptured, but the inference here is that those who seek God, seek God, find him and find in him their deepest satisfaction. He is the reward. So the reward for Enoch was not, hey, I got raptured, yay, don't have to live on earth anymore. The reward was, I am with Christ right now. But even before then, as we'll see in Genesis 5, he was always with God because he liked to take a jaunty stroll. God is the reward. In the Greek, there's a Greek word I'm not even going to try to pronounce in regards to seeking. It says it denotes a singular determination to devote oneself to the service of God. It implies the recognition that human action has to demonstrate its integrity before God. The firm expectation of the reward, then, is the matter of unwavering hope in the God who controls the future. So in seeking God, Enoch had this determination that he would follow God, but he sought God because he trusted his future with God. And when you know that God holds the future, you can have faith in the present, right? Because you don't have to worry about what's coming then, so you can chill out now. And you can trust that flourishing looks like following. Flourishing doesn't necessarily mean you have to own a home. That could be a version of it for you. But flourishing looks like following Christ. In Genesis 5, this is our first mention of Enoch. It tells us that when Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. And after he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. So here is the record of Enoch's birth, if you're interested. Jared, the second longest living person in the Bible. And then it tells us about Enoch himself. It says, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. It's told us that twice. And then he was no more, because God took him away. So Enoch just walked with God. And one day he just kept walking, just walked into heaven. I'm not really sure how that happens. The only other person in the Bible who gets raptured is Elijah. He gets chariots of fire. I don't know if that happened with Enoch or God was just like, come on up, guy. Like, off you go. It was obviously a surprise because Hebrews 11 tells us they looked for him. They're like, where is Enoch? This walk has taken longer than normal. He's still out there. He went walking 3 weeks ago. We haven't seen him. They never found him because God took him. Also, this is all the Old Testament tells us about him, by the way. That's it. That little blurb right there. However, it actually tells us quite a bit. If we look at the whole picture in Genesis 5, there is a very specific format that it gives us. Now, Genesis 5 is a genealogy. The book of Genesis loves genealogies. It's like its favourite thing, just about. There's, I think, at least 10 genealogies in the book of Genesis. And in this one, in Genesis 5, it pretty much goes by this thing. This person, they had a son, then they had other sons and daughters, and then they died. And then this person had a son, and they had other sons and daughters, and then they died. And then this person had a son, and they had, you get the idea, right? That's pretty much it. There's only 2 variations in that list that they give us more information about. And in Genesis, it always gives us more information about people who matter, when it wants to make a point. So one of those is Noah. So Noah he doesn't get a whole big thing about other sons and daughters. He just became the father of Shem, Ham and Japheth. And we also get a little bit of commentary on what his name means by his father Lamech. Noah's he's a pretty big deal, like in chapter 6, which is the next chapter over, so it kind of makes sense that they highlight him a little bit. And the only other person who gets any information is Enoch, and it says he had a son, he walked with God and was taken. In a list of people who die, the person not dying is kind of noticeable, right? Yeah. So the author of Genesis is trying to show us something here. And there's 3 things we can notice just from this genealogy. 1, his position in the genealogy, which will tell us something about him. 2, his righteousness and repentance. And 3, his prophetic vision. Did you pick all that up from the genealogy? Oh, that's all right. We'll break it apart. His position in the lineage, he was number 7. Number 7 is a big deal in the Hebrew Bible. It's the number of completion. It's the number of perfection. As we'll discuss in a minute, Enoch was the first person to prophesy anything related to end times way back in Genesis 7, so there could be a connection there. I haven't really looked into it, not going down that rabbit hole, but you can look into that if you like. But also there's a contrast with another number 7. Now, back to Genesis and genealogies, I'll just tell you this little story because I think it's fun. At the start of Genesis, we have this sin issue, right? Adam and Eve eat fruit, it's terrible, world goes into chaos, very, very bad times. And God says, hey, it's okay because the son of, one day, someone is going to come and going to crush the heel of the serpent. We all know that's Jesus. But at the beginning, you don't know that's Jesus. So you're just looking for the person who's going to fix it. And what Genesis does is it shows us how the world began, how the nation of Israel began, how all the nations began. So it tells us all of these different names, but it draws our attention always to the line of promise. Because it's telling us all the time, focus on when the Messiah is coming. Focus on the person who's going to crush the serpent's head. And it does that by giving us lists of names. But it takes the name of the rejected line or the rebellious line and it just puts their little information in a list. This person had this son and this son and this son and this son and this son. And then it takes the line of promise, the line of faith, and it tells us stories about them. So you'll see later that when it comes to the descendants of Ishmael, they're a list. When it comes to the descendants of Isaac, there's stories. When it comes to the descendants of Esau, it's a list. When it comes to the descendants of Jacob, there's stories. With the 12 sons of Jacob, they all get a little bit of a mention, but really the attention focuses in on Joseph, the son of promise, and Judah, who is the line from which Jesus will come. So it's always drawing your attention. Back in Genesis 4, we've got this lovely little story about Cain and Abel, the first children of Adam and Eve. You know that story, Cain kills his brother. And God says, well, that's it. You just have to go live by yourself in the desert now and you're never going to grow things out of the earth. And Cain is very, very sad and he's like, well, this is not a great time for me. Maybe don't kill your brother. Good life advice there, guys. Young people, don't kill your siblings or any people. Just don't kill people. And God says, it's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark on your head. And anyone who sees that mark will know, don't touch you, don't kill you. And if they do, they're going to get sevenfold vengeance on them. So Cain wanders off and he gets married, probably to his sister, which is a bit weird, but anyway. And then it tells us in Genesis 4, his family. Now, he's not the promised line. He's the line of rebellion. But it tells us we get to the 7th person in his line. This person is the 7th from Adam. Just like our good friend Enoch, but he's in the rebellious line. And it says that he married 2 women. One name was Adar and the other name Zillah. And Adar gave birth to Jubal, and he was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. And his brother's name was Jubal. How was that confusing in their family? And he was the father of all who play stringed instruments and pipes. And Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. So very interesting history there on where instruments and tents and iron came from. Lamech, it says in verse 23, said to his wives, Adar and Zillah, listen to me, wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. Genesis 4 ends pretty much there. Why? Because it's wanting us to contrast the seventh in the line of rebellion with the seventh in the line of promise. Lamech here sets himself up as arrogant. He's murderous. He takes 2 wives, which you're not supposed to do. And he says, you know what, this was what they did for Cain, but I am 10 times more important. What he's really set himself up is to be 10 times more arrogant than literally the worst person in the world at that time. Yeah. Cain was the worst, but actually I'm 10 times worse. And this comes right before Genesis 5. So they're saying contrast these two, because the rebellious line is arrogant, it's self-serving, but the line of faith, that's all about walking with God. Yeah. We see repentance and righteousness. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. We read this. After he became the father of Methuselah. You know what after means in the Hebrew? After. There's no hidden meanings there. Guy has a baby and goes, oh, now I think I'll walk with God. Clearly something happened there and he changed his life. His son was born. He said, I'm going to go walking with God now. We don't know how rebellious he was before then. We know the world was a pretty dark place because we've just heard about Lamech. We know what it's going to be like because we know what happens with Noah. We don't know if he lived outright rebellion or if he was just kind of indifferent, but something happened with the birth of his son and he went, that's it. I'm walking with God. I repent of that old way of living and I'm just going to walk with God because clearly that is the most important thing. It may have had to do with his prophetic vision. Enoch named his son Methuselah. If you break this down into the Hebrew root words, you'll find his name means his death shall bring or his death sends. That's a lovely thing to name your child. Anyone else want to call their kid Methuselah? You know, the year that Methuselah died was the year the flood came. Yeah, if you can actually work that out through the numbers given to you in Genesis 5, they give you all the dates. So God showed Enoch something and he named his son. And when Methuselah dies, it's going to bring something. He may not have known exactly what he was going to bring, but he knew it was going to bring something. You know, Methuselah is the oldest person in the Bible. 969 years. If anyone ever says that God is not gracious in the Old Testament, they can just go and look at Methuselah, who was born knowing that when he died, something was going to be unleashed and God went, I'm just going to keep you alive because I need to give everyone a chance. Enoch saw something. Jude 14 to 15, the second last book of the Bible, tells us Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. He talks about lawless people. He says, see, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone and to convict all of them of all the ungodly acts they have committed in their ungodliness and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him. There's a lot of ungodlies there. Jude was holding no punches. Enoch was holding no punches because, again, he lived in a terrible time. He lived in a time where God was like, I'm done. Let's start again. This is so bad. But I see the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands. This is the second coming of Christ. The seventh from Adam looked forward and saw the day that Christ comes and judges the earth and brings his glory. Like, how good is that? Wouldn't that make you live a little bit differently if you were getting those kind of visions? He saw something and it changed him. He saw what the future looked like. It changed how he lived. And he went, I'm just going to walk with God all the time, walking with God. What does it mean to walk with God? It means where he goes, you go. He wasn't walking ahead of God. It doesn't say that. He wasn't, walking behind him. He didn't sit down for a while and then have to catch a bus and catch up to God. He walked faithfully with God. When God said stop, he stopped. When God said we're going here, we're going here. When God said, okay, let's go up that mountain, he was like, okay, but I'm not a mountain goat, so you might need to help me. When God said, all right, we're going in that valley, he's like, okay, I'll go if you're there with me, because that place looks scary. He walked faithfully with God. And this is the call to all of us, to walk faithfully with God. When God says go, you go. When God says stop, you stop. When God says let's head up this mountain, you're like, okay, let me put on my hiking boots. Because where you go, I will go. Enoch's whole life was a jaunty stroll with God. They had the same vision, the same purpose. They're part of the same story. He saw what God was going to do one day. He's like, I'm going to stick around with this guy because he's going to bring it all to rights, because right now everything is terrible. And God was so pleased, he took Enoch from the earth. It's amazing, isn't it? Imagine pleasing God that much that it's like, oh, just come on. I can't wait for you to die. Come on up, buddy. Hebrews 11, though, it's not a formula. If we're looking at this to go, well, if I please God enough, maybe I'll just get raptured, that's probably not going to happen. I'm not going to say definitely not, because I'm not God. I don't get to choose those things. If I did, I would have already been gone by now. There's nothing in the book that says, hey, if you do what Abraham did, then you'll get the same blessing that Abraham did. You know, if you do what Moses' mother did, or what the Israelites did when they walked through dry land and saw the walls, you know, then you'll be blessed the same way. It doesn't say all that. It just tells us what they did. It's not a formula. It's not saying do this and this happens, but it is showing us a story of people who saw a bigger picture. And it tells us about some of the things that it gets to the end of the book and it goes, oh, by the way, I've kind of really spent too much time on the first few people in the Bible. I haven't even got to all the other people later on. Hebrews 11 doesn't even cover half of the people that we would consider heroes, like David. It doesn't even get to them. There's only so much space they've got. So he gives us this summary and he tells us, or whoever, that by faith kingdoms were conquered. By faith justice was enforced. Promises were obtained. Lions' mouths stopped. We're talking about, obviously, Daniel there. Fire quenched. The sword was escaped. Strength came out of weakness. There was might in war. Foreign armies, they were put to flight. And women received back their dead. How good is that? And then it says that all the people who did this got a pay rise and a gift basket in the mail because they were such good heroes of faith. It does not say that. It tells us there were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted and mistreated, flourishing. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. And then that lovely verse, they were all commended for their faith, yet they did not receive what had been promised. You know, you look at Enoch, he gets like 6 verses total in the Bible. He's commended as a person who walks with God. He's got the same vision as God. He pleases God. God raptures him. What a great time. You've got Isaiah, who walks with God, who prophesies. He writes 66 books. He gets a whole book for him, you know. He walks with God. He has visions of the future. He's fully committed. He can see the same picture. And what happened to him? They put him in a tree trunk and sawed him in half. You don't know in your life of faith if you're going to be Enoch or Isaiah, right? You could be either. Let's all hope we're not Isaiah. Like, I can think of better ways to die. Don't need to be raptured. Don't really want to be sawed in two, though, if I'm just being completely honest. But that's what faith is. It's going, it doesn't matter if I'm going to be Enoch or Isaiah. I just want to get the same picture and get on the same page with you, God. And the question is, what did the heroes of old see that enabled them to endure what they did and to follow even though they never saw the promise fulfilled? What enabled them to endure? Well, firstly, the Lord was their reward. That was it. When the Lord's your reward, you can do anything. Because you know what? If you've got the Lord, you're flourishing. That is the good life right there. You don't need anything else because you have Jesus. That is the highest reward you can get. Stuff everything else in the world. This is the most important thing. So yeah, they didn't get to see Jesus come. They didn't get to see the world righted. They didn't get to see the wicked judged. The last thing they saw might have been the executioner's sword coming towards them, but it didn't matter because they'd already received their reward, which was the Lord. But secondly, they understood what the good life really was. They understood what it means to live because they got the right story. I've been reading a book by a Christian philosopher called James K.A. Smith, and he talks about how all of us are geared towards wanting to flourish. That's what we do because God made us that way, right? Nobody goes, well, I hope I have a really terrible day today and that everything goes bad. Nobody sets about making goals for their life, going, let's see how bad we can get this. We've got a whole bunch of year 12s and youth, they're graduating. They didn't get up at their chapel and when they said, oh, what are you planning to do in the future? They're like, absolutely nothing. I'm going to see how bad I can make it go. They're full of hopes for the future because that's the way we're wired. And the thing is that what we see is what we'll move towards. And what you desire is what you move towards. If you want something, you'll move towards it. Plot twist, we don't always desire what we think we desire. You want to know what you actually like, what you actually love, what are you moving towards? Because you can say you love something, but if you're not moving towards it, you don't actually love it as much as the thing you're moving towards. Yeah. And our desires, they're formed by the stories we engage in. They're formed by culture, by our families, by the books we read, by the movies we watch, by how much time we spend on Instagram scrolling. And if our version of the good life is not informed by the biblical story, then we'll not move in the direction of faith. This is why Hebrews 11 is so important, why we need to know their story. Because that informs our story. That shows us what actually matters. That has to matter more than the other stories that we're told. Because if we're not living in faith, we're not pleasing God. And that's a harsh word, but that's the word. It says without faith, it is impossible to please God. Doesn't matter what you do. If you don't have faith, you can't please him. And I think we all want to please God. So what is the good life? James K.A. Smith explains it like this. This is a long quote. I have printed out copies for people who like to take photos, so you can just listen. I would love to have actually unpacked this. He pulls on lots of biblical literature from the Old Testament right through, but we don't have time, but I'll just give you the roundup version. The good life, the biblical version of the good life, it's a vision of wolves dwelling with lambs and of children safe from lions and other ravagers. It's a world where the chains of injustice are broken and the lame are made to walk and guns are beaten into plowshares. It's a biblical vision of the good life that is sung by Mary in Luke 1 when she celebrates that the hungry are filled with good things and about the exaltation of the lowly. It's a song that's sung by a choir from every tribe and tongue and nation of the earth. It's the inbreaking of a world that's announced by King Jesus, where the brokenhearted are healed and captives are liberated and the oppressed are set free. It's a world where widows and orphans and immigrants, the vulnerable among us, are seen and valued and protected. The biblical vision of the good life is the picture of a world where God dwells in our midst, wiping away every tear, having conquered death. And the madness of the Christian life is that the good life is living towards that in the here and now. The upside downness of the biblical vision of the good life is the scandalous truth that you lose your life. You find your life by losing it. That joy comes to you when you actually relinquish your fixation on your own self-fulfillment and self-preservation. That picking up a cross is the way to flourishing. That other people are co-pilgrims, not competitors. The good life isn't about what you find and acquire. The good life is being found by the one who made you. We have seen and heard terrible things in the news the past few weeks. We do not live in a world where children are safe. We live in a world where children are ripped from their families, some of them ripped from their mothers' bodies. Or where they're hungry because they're blockaded in by people who do not have any vision of the sanctity of human life at all. We do not live in a world where our guns are beaten into ploughshares, rather people are shooting their neighbours up. But we can still see that. We can choose to believe that because that will happen, because it's biblical, because God's promised it. That one day wolves and lambs can lie down. One day children can go and play with lions and it's going to be okay. They're going to be safe. We live towards that now, a world where the oppressed are set free, where everyone is noted, where everybody is loved. A world where every tear is wiped away because Jesus dwells in our midst. Right now he dwells in us, and how blessed are we. We got what these guys in Hebrews 11 never had, but there's still more coming, right? Smith says the question we need to ask ourselves, is that the story that has captured our imaginations? Is that what we are living towards? And is that what we are demonstrating to our world? Are we demonstrating that we believe for a future where God comes in all his glory and where the kingdom of God is unleashed upon the earth? Are we demonstrating that the good life is that to our children, to our young people? Or do they think that the good life is how many cars you get and trying to get that house and your holidays and what uni degree? I get really passionate about children being pushed towards uni degrees when they finish school, as if all that matters is the piece of paper you get at the end. You know what, young people? All that matters is you follow Jesus. The rest actually doesn't matter at all. Who cares about your house? Who cares about your car? Who cares about your piece of paper? Who cares what anyone says about you? The good life is Jesus. It's living with Jesus. Everything else is just gravy. Can I get the band up, please? I want to ask the question, does flourishing look like following to you? And I asked this question to myself because this message wrecked me, because I went, you know what? I put a lot of stock in flourishing in other ways. But real flourishing is following Christ. It's picking up your cross and going, I'm all in. Your vision, I don't fully have that all yet, but I'm gonna get on board with it. In Hebrews 12, which comes right after Hebrews 11, just in case you were wondering, it says, therefore. So based on everything you've just read in Hebrews 11, the writer of Hebrews wants you to say, we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all these guys. So therefore, throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. He's like, don't even walk, let's just run it. Let's get purposeful about it. Jesus, who is the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus' vision of the good life was relationship with you, and it enabled him to go to the cross because he loved you and he saw the bigger picture. When we can get our eyes on the things that God has his eyes on, then we will have faith to live our life the way that we're meant to. It takes faith to believe that the best kind of life involves simply walking with Jesus, especially in our materialistic culture, which wants to tell us the best kind of life has all the stuff. It's got the boats and the shoes and whatever else it is that you're into. But the biblical example, the story of Hebrews 11, the story of Jesus, it's actually the best kind of life is walking with God, getting on board with what he's doing. Like I said, everything else is gravy. So I want to challenge you this morning. Do you have faith? We've been talking about faith. We've been talking about faith faith for things, and that's good. We have to have faith for things. But this morning I want to ask you about your faith for your life. Your faith for living your life. Which way are you walking? What are you looking at? What are you directed toward? What do you desire? What stories are you listening to? Do you need to step out in faith this morning to say, I want to have faith that actually all I need is Jesus? I'm going to step out for that because I need that. Open the altar this morning. If you want to do some business with God, come and do some business with God. If you want prayer, we're happy to pray for you. Let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to assume that it's just you and Jesus and you having your Enoch moment going. This day, the 29th of October 2023, I'm just walking with God. That's it. Reaffirm it. Show me, Lord. Show me what you see. Show me what the good life is. Show me your vision. Show me what it is that I want to do. Give me faith to believe that this is the most important thing.